as Eli Manning stays on his feet. It is caught by Tyree.
Hello, welcome to Catch the Moment podcast. I'm your host, David Tyree. This is where you come to get the details. This is where you come to get the process and the journey that's going to get you to your next moment. Today, I'm really excited about who I have as a guest right here in mi casa. It's my guy. I actually got a chance to sit down with this young, emerging business leader, Adam White of Front Office Sports. Appreciate you for coming out, man.
Of course, man. Of course.
Listen,
excited to be here.
So I gotta start 100% real, right? So we've been grinding. We out here getting these episodes done. You're reaching out to people, and I'm not everybody's favorite, but I'm a few people's favorite in New York City. So I get mixed reviews as far as coming out to the dungeon in Jersey, you know. And I want to just big shout Adam White because, bro, you made zero excuses on how to get this done, man.
Yeah.
Like, it was very admirable. On time, you know, we're here on time. Came from New York City to New Jersey. And I found so many people unwilling to just, like, commit to something. Now, tell me, that's impressive. That's the kind of stuff I'm actually, evaluating when I evaluate people. So tell me about your mindset, your work approach, your commitments, and your philosophy, even around just daily commitments.
I think it's all about showing up, right? I think as we're talking about here, I think also I've done a lot of these. Right? I did 110 informational interviews, and there were a lot of people who showed up for me. And so when I first started the business, obviously. And so I think at that point, you really have to say, okay, like if this person is making time for me and wants to do this for me, like I should be there for them. And I think that's what it's really about. It's like if you're going to make, my biggest pet peeve, and anyone will tell you this, is I just do not like people who say they're going to do something and then don't do it. And so my whole thing is if you're going to say you're going to do it, you better do it. And you should be there on time, and you should be there ready to go, and you should be there in a way that makes sense because, again, you're putting some of your time away for me to be out here and everyone else who's helping out, produce this and put this together. And so it's just about more than one person. It's not just this conversation. It's how everything is going to happen. And so, I don't know. I just think it kind of goes back to, I spent a lot of time working in the restaurant business, and I think most people should. Yeah. But you start to learn like what it is to be a team outside of playing sports and being on time and being responsible for your sections, your areas, making sure you have things cleaned. And it was so funny. I always remember one of my bosses is I was a freshman doing dishes at a bar in college, and he was always like, "If you have time to lean, you have time to clean," and that's always stuck with me, right? So that's a really good one because I think like people just, there's a lot more opportunity that you have if you're taking advantage of it. And so you just never know, right? And again, like when people are asking to spend time with you, if you want to spend time with them and you say you're going to do it, you should do it. And that's the easiest way to, I think, get ahead in the world because people appreciate that.
Man, let me tell you what, I appreciate it. And like I said, these are, somebody said, you're literally CEO, Front Office Sports. So if anybody who's listening today doesn't understand or know what Front Office Sports is, I think you're probably now emerging to be a part of the minority. It's a newsletter, right? A newsletter that goes straight to the email. So tell us about just the journey of Front Office Sports, what it is. It's literally one of my favorite products. And that's why I actually sought you out the first time we met. Yeah. So just give us the overview of, how this started and where you guys have arrived to. Yeah,
I think it's really matriculated and changed a lot. And I think that's the one thing, if anyone's listening, has to understand is that you're going to have to pivot. Things are going to change. When we first started, it was really 110 informational interviews that we did. And kind of that was the first thing that I did. So I started it actually 8 years ago, a couple days. So it's been 8 years. We've been a funded business from a private equity standpoint for about 4 years now.
Okay.
And, we're just now starting to hit our stride, right? 8 years into this. And every single day that we've woken up and worked on this and put to time and effort and energy into it. And so again, it's like some of these things aren't going to happen overnight, but originally it started out very similarly to even how we met, right? It was me reaching out to people, and I was doing a class project. I went to the University of Miami. I was doing a class project, and one of the things that we had to do was do informational interviews with people who worked in sports. Our professors at the time said, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. It's a mix of both, in my opinion, right? You need to know the right people, and you need to know what you're doing.
Gotta be credible.
But what happened was I was like, well, if I'm gonna get a job in here, I might as well find a way to know a bunch of people. And so what better way to know a bunch of people than just to continue to do these informational interviews? And so went back home to Arizona where I'm from, and it was after the summer. It was after my freshman year, and so I was playing baseball, working out in the morning, playing baseball at night, and I didn't have a pool. And you go back home, and if you've ever been to Arizona, it's 115 degrees in the summer, and there's not really much to do. So I'm like, well, what am I gonna do during the summer? And I was like, well, wait a second. I kind of did this one interview. What if I change this into doing more interviews potentially?
Sure.
And so I paid $40 for the first logo. And I like to joke with people, the site that I built on Wix at the time was like a black site with white text. So I was like dark mode before dark mode was cool, which was funny. Dope. But that's how it all started. And I literally just started reaching out to people and said, hey, my name's Adam. I'm a student at the University of Miami. Would love to tell your story. And it's just a totally different vibe you get from people versus like, hey, let me pick your brain. And it's like, oh my God, like I don't want to, let me tell your story. Like everyone likes their story told. Everyone wants to be kind of highlighted, and no one was really doing it at the time. And so we did 110 informational interviews that first year. Or I did. Russ, my number two, again, talk about showing up. I literally just put in our group chat for the university. Like they had a group chat for the sports administration program that I was in. And I just said, hey, I'm doing this. And Russ was the only one who responded on that Facebook group. And Russ has now been with me ever since. And it's been pretty cool to see how the business is. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Russ is amazing. Russ. Yeah, big shout out to Russ. And so, that's how it all started. And what was beautiful about that is we started the business as a media company with no money, no experience, no followers, nothing. And it was kind of advantageous now that you think about it, because we had the opportunity to really find out what we wanted to do, figure out things, take risks, throw things up against the wall, see what it fit and didn't fit. And essentially, while I was in school, I just leveraged the fact that I was in school. Everyone wants to talk to students and give back to students.
Sure.
And then I was able to, from there, be able to basically take all of the interviews that I did, and it was just market research. Okay. So essentially, like, everyone I asked is like, what do you want to see in this category? What are you looking for? And, from there, people were telling me, oh, we want this type of content. We want these type of awards. We want to do this, that, and the other. And so, for example, Rising 25, which is one of our big award platforms that is sponsored by Anheuser-Busch, nice. It happened because I was talking to all of these people, and they said, we want to have awards for younger people. They're the people in sports who work really hard, don't get paid very much, and all of these different things. And then I was like, okay, well, if that's the case, then we should launch this. And we did. And, I think that's been like a really beneficial thing. And to this day, I tell people, if we had gotten the money from a funding standpoint that we would have had day one, I don't think we would be here, because we took those 4 years to figure out what the business was. We had to genuinely connect with the community in a way that was very different. Sure. And so people really loved the brand from day one. And I think that's been kind of a differentiating factor. And as you go, and everyone talks about it, brand is moat. Sure. For a lot of people, right? Why do you go to Dunkin' over Starbucks or something like that? It's because of the brand, right? For the most part. So, as we think about that, that's what we really focused on, is how do we really drive from a community standpoint, a brand standpoint, and the business has transitioned a ton since then, right?
Sure,
so you've had, we started out as an informational interview. I was just looking back, because like I said, it was 8 years ago, and I was looking back at like some of the old tweets that I had, and it was like, just like these random things, and it was like our original bio was like the place to go for like, career advice in sports or something like that. And it's changed drastically from there. But luckily, as we've pivoted, we've been able to keep our core audience and then grow new audience. And I think that was been the big focus is, all right, well, let's look at beyond that. Let's focus on, being like an enterprise news business, obviously leading with the newsletter and kind of what we saw during COVID, where there was a lot of growth opportunity there for us. And now it's really just about how do we build like a true multi-platform media brand, right? For what we're defining as the modern sports consumer. And what that is like a 25 to 54-year-old working professional, people who care about what's happening off the field more than they care about what's happening on the field. And we really start to see that's where a lot of the new audience growth has come from, is because we're not just focusing on the 1% of the 1% inside of sports. We're covering things that make a difference and are meaningful outside of just an industry, like sports as an industry. Sure. And so that's kind of been the maturation over the last 8 years. And you'll start to see more of us from, audio. We're just getting into podcasting, original podcasting, which is great. Video, obviously, social, we've been big in. Newsletters has been the primary delivery method of the business for a long time. And so we're, starting to double down on the site side of things as well.
Bro, y'all are absolutely killing it. Like I said, for me, it's been at least at least 3 to 4 years since. I don't know how this amazing product found itself in my email, but like I am that guy who it's like, I've been in sports, so there's elements that have just been part of my life, the whole GM element, the whole, some of the sponsorship element, but then there's these athletes who are always going to want to emerge and understand more how their life, their brand fits in the ecosystem or the economy of business. And that's what front office sports did for me. It actually gave me a easy way to get news that actually cared about.
Yeah,
right?
Totally. I mean, literally, that's our whole conversation. When I talk to anyone from advertisers to investors to whatever, I'll literally be on the call with them and I say, when was the last time you went to ESPN.com? No offense to ESPN. And you're like, I don't know. And I'm like, when was the last time you checked your inbox? And they'll go, oh, right, during this meeting. And I was like, exactly right. So our content is reaching our audience where they are consuming their information, which is the inbox. And we've always joked about how the fact like the inbox is the new homepage in a sense, right? You're not going to ESPN.com. You're going to davidtyree@gmail.com or whatever it is. You're opening your inbox. It's the first thing you open. It's the first thing you're reading through in the morning, which I think is very different from previous times and previous kind of iterations of where things have been. So again, I think you have to meet specifically from an audience perspective, you have to meet your audience where they are. And it's so funny because people oftentimes think we're much bigger than we are because they're like, I go on LinkedIn and I see you. I go on Instagram and I see you. I go on Twitter and I see you. You're in my inbox twice a day. I'm on your site. And we were just running some data and it's so funny. You were saying like 3-4 years, like I was just on average, you were looking at 1 in 3 of our subscribers are opening 75% or more of the time, which is like crazy. It's like this extremely sticky product. And I think that's been something that's really been meaningful and why we've been able to kind of extend, because again, you look at some of these people who are on our list, and obviously we have emails, so we know who they are for the most part. And it's like everyone from the general counsel of Netflix to Mark Cuban, and you start to say, well, why does the general counsel of Netflix care about this? Well, what's been the most talked about thing on Netflix? Formula One Drive to Survive, right? And so I think that's when you start to think about like the business has evolved from just being like, again, something that's focused on career advice to where we're talking about how we're covering really now at this point the influence that sports has on business and culture. And it's just much, much broader than that, because now you have the validation of the biggest companies in the world who are talking about and buying media rights in sports. Apple just did the MLS deal, right? Like Amazon has Thursday Night Football. Netflix, has hinted at it. Like Reed Hastings has mentioned it, that that the only live rights they would get is Formula One, but obviously that happened and ESPN took that back for the next few years as they re-signed that deal. But it's kind of penetrated every part of our society in ways that now are much broader. And as you hinted about the athlete side of things, it's like we kind of talk to people and we say, look, there's all these business people who wanted to be athletes, and there's all these athletes who want to be business people.
There it is.
And there's like the nexus here, and this is where you have this opportunity to be in a really interesting space and cover all of this stuff. So that's again been some of the, I would say, not secret sauce, but just been ways that we've been able to navigate.
Man, you guys have done it extremely well, and just more or less with intent. Like you said, the pivots is what I've always appreciated. Now I like. It's always sober to me, because I've said this on not just on this podcast. You have to have mentors that are older than you, and I think we're at a place now where you actually have to have mentors that might be younger than you. Yeah, it's a very interesting world in relation to where we are, not just with tech and social. It's just the way that the emerging generation thinks. So I know that when you started this, you're in college, so you're talking about being a teenager. You're 26?
I'm 27.
27.
Yep.
Excellent. So you are the rising 25.
I can't win the award, unfortunately. Yeah, unfortunately.
That's just so unfair.
Yeah, I know.
But talk to me about, like, okay, I've heard you talk about the process, the grind, the pain points in some articles and interviews. Was there ever a moment where you were just like, I don't even know if this is worth it? Like, I know this is probably fun and intriguing, but what was the most stressful or anxious moment as you've evolved to this place?
Yeah, I think COVID was really interesting, obviously. We're an advertising-supported business, and we came out of, our first year post-fundraising. So, look, we've been working on this business since 2014 in some way, but it was really a hobby from 2014 until 2018. We hired our first full-time employee in 2019. So, we've only been really running the business for 4 years. And the first year of the startup, you're just trying to figure it out, especially at 23. I was just like, what the F am I doing? I'm trying to figure this out. So we made some money and we're like, all right, cool. This is great. Like there's something here. Like we got something. And then we go into the second year feeling really good. I remember we got like a new little office space in New York. It was great. We had just signed a lease in January. We had just hired some more people. We're like, awesome. This is going to be great. We're going to continue to grow. 3 months into that, pandemic hits. We're like, oh crap, don't know what we're doing. The pandemic was a horrible time for many people, but for us, it was kind of crazy. It allowed us to, even though I remember calling Russ again a couple times and I said, look, if there's anything that's going to kill this business and it's a pandemic, like I don't think we could have planned for that. Like we just couldn't have.
Sure.
And so we were able to kind of figure it out. And what we did do then at that point is we ended up really doubling down on the newsletter because that's where we're seeing so much growth, right? We were just seeing, again, what happened was we were covering everything that's happening off the field, and all of a sudden nothing was happening on the field. And so people were coming to us and we're like saying, hey, like this is what's going on, right? Like the biggest stories as was unfolding off the bubble, like all of this stuff for the NBA was all off the field.
Owners, protests,
everything. Everything. It was crazy. And so we started to see a real uptick there. So doubled down on that, shifted the entire strategy, hired some new editorial people.
Sure.
I mean, literally changed out the entire editorial team. And that's the hard part about a content business is that it's not something like a tech company where you can put together the code, ship it, and you can take a week off, right? Like if you're not producing content every single day, if that newsletter is not in your inbox every single day, if there's nothing on social, it's just a 24/7 nonstop grind. And so I think that's the biggest thing that we've learned is that we've just, again, we got to the point where we felt like we were pretty invaluable for our core group of audience. And then we were able to find adjacent audiences, as you were mentioning, people who are not really in sports, but are either interested in what's happening or also are in like real estate and they have some holdings in this or are in media and technology. Like most of our audience is now coming from outside of quote unquote sports, right? Which would be teams, leagues, everything like that. You're looking at people who are real estate, private equity, finance, because it's really becoming, there's a lot more sophistication in the market. Everyone's talking about sports as an asset class, right? Like
there you go.
You start to see all of these things where, some of the biggest transactions now in business are team changes, right? Like Rob Walton, who's arguably one of the wealthiest people in America, just bought the Denver Broncos. And so now all of a sudden, Jeff Bezos has been linked to a few teams as well.
Correct.
And you start to think about, okay, so all of these business titans, all of these biggest brands in the world are all making sports either a core part of their strategy or owning those teams.
Correct.
And so it's just like, it's kind of undeniable at this fact.
It certainly is. I'm going to pivot back because I always want to get this perspective. This is obviously Catch the Moment podcast. So I like to ask every guest, where were you when you saw the helmet catch? What were your thoughts? Were there any thoughts or any story at that time?
Yeah, I mean, I was in Phoenix where it was because I was born and raised in Arizona. So you were just down the street from when it happened. To be honest with you, I think I was rooting for the Patriots that day. This was 2008, so 15 years ago. I was how old? I'm 27 now. I was 12.
Yeah.
So
it's happy to ruin you.
Yeah. I think I just wanted to see a perfect season. I thought that was cool. And I mean, I remember. I can't remember. I think we were watching it with our family members, and the first thing is even at 12, you're like, oh shit, like that. That happened, right? Like, did that happen? And then everyone's watching the replay, and it's funny because like, I try to like think about what that moment would have been like now when you talk about like with social and stuff like that as much more prevalent. It would have been up there with like, Odell Beckham's catch.
Absolutely.
It would have been up there with that from a conversational standpoint, just because of the fact that what would have happened at that time. I mean, the internet would have blown up. Especially because it was the Tom Brady, it was them, perfect season, it was all of this stuff. The Giants kind of coming in here and knocking them off. But yeah, I was in Arizona at the time when all of this was happening.
You was in the country. You was out there in the desert with your boy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a cool thing for me because it means so much. Like I said, this New York City. You've been in New York City now, doing business for a number of years. It means so much to so many people. So most people know exactly where they were, right where they were at that moment. Now I'm gonna flip it on you. Like I said, in light of your young, emerging, successful career, what would you say has been the signature moment or defining moment at this point in your career?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think there's been a few, but I think the one I remember Russ and I, we were talking about this. I had just so when I graduated, I thought I was going to get a job with the PGA Tour. I didn't get a job with the PGA Tour. Went like 14 rounds of interviews deep. For some reason, fate may have it. I think I didn't get the
14
job.
14 rounds?
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy.
I bet they biting their fingernails, right?
It's crazy. It's crazy. So anyways, I think it was fate, and like have nothing but love for a lot of the people there. Most of them are readers and stuff
you
like
just
that.
go
So
to
it's been
was
good.
it the Live Tour now?
No live tour. No live tour. I'm not good enough, and I'm not Charles Barkley, so unfortunately.
I got you.
But anyways, though, that's what happened, and I went back to Miami, and I was like, well, I'm not going to go home, right? I think it was a little bit too prideful to be like someone who went back after graduating and stuff like that. And so went back working in the restaurant, working on the site, everything like that. Probably 3 to 5 months later, we were just kind of starting to really make enough money to where I could almost get rid of the jobs and live, like make enough money for myself. Like it was like $3,000 a month, I think is what the business was making, like just enough to pay the bills. And so I was like, all right, well, let's figure this out. And so this is at the time that we'd met kind of our first investors. We were going through these conversations, and I like blindly pitched my guy at Anheuser-Busch at the time, Nick Kelly, about Rising 25. And I was like, hey, like, I think you guys should sponsor this. And he's like, yeah, that makes sense. Just send me a proposal and would love to see it. And I talked to Russ. I was like, how much do you think we should charge him? And we kind of came up with a number, and I just sent it to him, and he was like, this is good. And then he's like, just send me the contract. And I was like, all right. And so it was the biggest deal that we'd ever signed at the time. We used that conversation to have the investors. And so I think it was like, that was one of the big ones where it was just like, like Anheuser, at that point I felt, and Russ and I felt, we're like, okay, if Anheuser-Busch is going to sponsor us, I think we can get any brand that we want to buy advertising with us. And like, that was the true validator of the business at that point. And then, you started to see like a bunch of different other things that have come up. You start to break mile. You get 10 employees, 20 employees, 30 employees. Sure. And it becomes like more interesting. And then you're like, all right, you do your first $1 million in revenue, and you do your first $5 million in revenue. And now you're looking at what's the next thing. And so,
excellent.
I think there's been definitely a lot of areas. I mean, I think Rising 25, I always go back to it because it's been so impactful for so many people. And I think that's been the big thing that we've been able to really leverage. We launched it in a great educational business too. Our courses, our online learning business is really cool. And so the kind of true mission has always been about how do we provide stuff that's accessible, and for like, if we had a high paywall, there's probably no chance that you would have ever come across us, because it's like, you're interested enough, but are you interested enough to pay for it? Maybe now you are, but at day one you probably weren't. And so that's been the kind of mission for us. And so I definitely would say, like, I remember so distinctly in my Miami apartment that I called Russ and I was like, we got this deal. And I just remember like, I don't know, like hitting the wall so hard out of like celebration. I was like, how the fuck did we do that? You're like, yeah, exactly. We were just like screaming on the phone together. It was so funny.
That gets me hyped.
It was really, really cool. And I think, we've had other milestones since then, but I think that one we're just like, okay, we have a shot here if we continue to do this, because they are now believing in us. Yeah. And that was cool. That was really cool.
No, bro, I think that's it. I get hyped just kind of thinking about what it could be like in that picture. For so many of us, especially my generation of athlete, we were kind of in the middle of, there were opportunities, but we didn't have all the information on how to do business in our era. The internet social hadn't really reached. So you either had great help, or you were kind of like, almost like at bay. Like you want to do more, you can do more, but we don't know exactly how to do business, so we're a little terrified. So when you're watching, just people out here engaging, younger people, older people, people who've perfected their brand or finding their way, is pretty amazing. So here's something interesting I think works in, I don't want to say, the in our world, whether it's athletes, and I think even for business owners, et cetera. Now that you've kind of reached a measure of success, what are your obligations? Like, okay, whether it's to family, whether it's to cause, like, a friend of mine, we laugh. We call it the black tax. Like, we call it the black tax. It was like, if an athlete, becomes successful, he has this overwhelming burden to give back to his society, or his culture, his community, family. And I think it's very practical on one level, and then it's also very like sometimes unbalanced on some level. So I wondered, okay, I got to start asking other people, do you have those same sense of duty and obligations as a successful business owner?
I think you have to, right? Because we have stakeholders, right? Everyone's like, oh, what's like your motivation at this point? And I said, I have 35 employees who every day are counting on us to make the right decision, to make sure we have enough money in the bank to where, like at some point, right, you start to think about like, people are paying their kids' colleges with the salary that they're making here. And so I think for us, like that's where the duties and obligations are. My duties and obligations are making sure that the business every single day and the platform platform, one, is strong enough and the brand is meaningful enough that we're attracting real talent, that we're attracting real audience members, and then that we're really making sure that not only our employees taken care of, our audience is taken care of, we're serving them,
nice.
We're serving our stakeholders and our investors, right? Because at the end of the day, we have to return capital to them. Like that's the name of the game and why they invested in us. And so, yeah, there's a very, I would say it's not so much like me for my family or something like that directly. It's more like me for the people who work for us and for who work for the company, because it's really just about, or who support the company, right? Because, you know, if we do well, it looks great on our investors, our employees do better, they take care of things. You know, that's all I think about is I was talking to someone the other day and they mentioned that one of our employees was asking about, you know, our leave policy. So it seems like to me, they're getting ready to have a kid, which is great because they feel secure enough in their job and what they're doing here that they're like, all right, cool, we can have a kid and like we can feel good about that. And like now I'm thinking about, okay, well now I can't mess up or I can't go crazy because like that kid is now going to be dependent on some of this person's income, right? And so you just start to think about those things, and I think that's what you really have to realize is that there's more, as we were talking about before we came on here, there's more people than one kind of counting on this. And again, it's not even just that person, it's that person's wife or husband or other partner, it's that person's kids, it's that person's community, it's that, you know, you start to think about that. And I think this is why the importance of like small businesses and just in the US in general, and, you know, I would consider our business, it's big, but it's not like a real enterprise.
No, it's technically a small business.
Yeah. And so you start to think about just like how much impact that has on the community, where it's like, okay, now all of a sudden, like, we're paying people and those people are paying the rents of their landlords and those landlords are using that money to pay for their kids. It's just really, there's a lot of trickle down stuff and you have to think about it when you do it. And it's just, I think that's been the biggest motivating factor as we continue to go. People are always like, why don't you like go out and party? Why don't you drink? And I'm like, I have to wake up every single morning to make sure that like, one, we have our really great product and we have a really great team who's now shepherding that along, but we have to make sure that there's really like, it's just always stable as much as we possibly can, right? In a time where there's a lot of instability already, like the business has to be like, I don't want people waking up and being like, okay, does the business have enough money to pay my paycheck, right? Or do we have to worry about that, right? And I think those are, and then like we have advertisers, right, who are stakeholders who now have to, you know, you start to think about it. It's not just like a one person thing. It's employees, it's advertisers, it's partners, it's stakeholders, it's audience members, right? And so you start to really think about like there's true like meaning in all of that.
Man, well, what's so powerful about what you're talking about is now the athlete begins to see himself as a brand and business, but it actually alludes to the very same thing is I feel like we have the habit of giving back too early.
Yep.
Meaning like, not that you can't set up the foundation and find ways, but you haven't actually built a business that will sustain the enduring factor of your post-career. We don't even know what that is when you're in your second and third year. You have people who are buying homes for their mothers. You have people who are, you know, setting up parks. Things that need to be done, things that are aspirational. And I don't think there's any right way to do this, just to be clear. Yeah. But when I'm listening to you, you're like, now that I have established a business and a brand that other people see the value in, I actually have to chart the waters to keep this stable and sustaining because there's other people involved. And it might not be prudent just to do everything immediately. It's
totally. I mean, 100%. You have to, again, like, we could wake up tomorrow and if we did things wrong, like there'd be, you know, the business wouldn't be where it needs to be. And then we'd have issues. And now all of a sudden you have 35 people who may be out of work or something like that, and you just don't want to create that type of atmosphere. So yeah, it's really just, again, we have this saying internally where it's, we don't set the bar, we raise the bar, and even if we set the bar, we have to raise it, right? And so I think that's always been like the thing is we look at other people from even just like a kind of, you know, measuring up, and it's like, all right, if they're doing that, like, how do we take it to the next level? And then if we're the ones who are leading the way, how do we take what we're doing to the next level? Because again, if you're not continuing to do that, I always joke with the team, but it's not even a joke, it's real. I said, like, if we are going to say, you know, these are the best employers in sports, that's one of our awards, I'm like, we have to live out all of those values ourselves. Like, if we're going to say that this is an innovative XYZ, well, we have to be the most innovative. And I think that's what a lot of people almost like don't really realize is that if you are specifically from a media company standpoint, this is our belief, if you aren't setting the tone with all of the things that you're doing, how can you then be seen as authoritative and thoughtful enough to be able to say that this person is a rising 25,
That's
right?
right.
And this person is best employers. If you aren't at least living out or trying to make sure that you're living out that that aspirational and that kind of thing. And so I think that's been big for us is, again, have we built from a brand that has a lot of authority in the space is because we've been really focused on that.
Man, inspirational, bro. You actually alluded to something within my next question. You know, successful leaders obviously build great habits, right? So have you had to overcome any negative habits, or, you know, how has that process been for you? Like within your, you know, your ecosystem of Adam White and what makes you on your A game, what have you had to overcome? Has there been something you had to overcome, or what makes you unique and intentional about how you're living this out for front office sports?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think for a long time, I feel like I understood what I wanted to do. And everyone's like, oh, did you make sacrifices and this, that, and the other? And I said, well, I don't think there's really any sacrifices. There are no sacrifices in life. There's just choices in life. And once you make a choice, then you should do that. And you just continue to make other choices. Like for me in college, like I don't think I was sacrificing time by not going out with my buddies. It was a choice for me, but that choice led to something else, and that choice led to something else. And I think, again, it's not like sacrifices. It's really choices and trade-offs, right? You're just trading off maybe going out and getting drunk with your buddies to do something else, right? And like it's cool, and that's fine. And there's people who can do that, and there's nothing against that. But like there's other opportunities there. And so I think from my perspective, it's really just been about what trade-offs am I willing to live with, right? Like one of the first trade-off that I was willing to live with was I was like, all right, well, I'm going to just not go and get a full-time job, and I'm going to lean into the business. And sure, like I just graduated from Miami. I drive a $600 truck with no air conditioning, and I'm working at a restaurant. But no one knows that because they only know what I'm doing online, and that, you know, it's, you know, what front office sports is. But like for 2 years, really, when I was still running the business early on, and it was like really, really nascent, and we weren't making enough money, like no one knew I was working 3 jobs. But that's what was happening on behind the scenes. And so, you know, you just start to think about all of these things. I don't know if there was any negative things per se, but it's just more about like trying to figure out like what's the routine, what's the thing that you're willing to trade off for, not really give up on, but just like trade off for. And what can the upside be? Yeah,
I like it. I think it's just an exchange in language, whether sacrifice or trade off. I kind of use the term sacrifice a little more often because I know that I don't look at sacrifice as a bad thing. You know, it's kind of like trade-off is a softer language, but since I can't do everything, when I choose to do this, it may be at the expense of something else, right? That's the trade-off. And that's sacrificial in some element, and there's noble sacrifices, and I think there's some less noble sacrifices potentially, right, when it's relationships. And I'm not even talking about, you know, some things are always subjective, whether it's your social life and decision making. But I think when you're talking about being a high performer, being goal oriented, you begin to place things typically where they belong. Like fun is very overrated. It's kind of like the Bill Belichick approach to football. Like,
well, I mean, people always ask me too. They're like, "Why do you work so much?" And I like it. It's fun, you know what I mean? Like, it's like I don't know. It's like that's like what I like to do, right? Like, I like to work on the business. I like to make sure that the business is really cool because like at the end of the day, like that's fun to me. I mean, I think, and I saw something the other day, I think it was on social and I don't remember it directly, but it's like, there's nothing wrong with being obsessed with something you like to do. People for some reason make it like almost like negative. Oh, you're obsessed with this. You're obsessed with this. But like, if I like to do it, why does it matter if I'm obsessed with it? I think it's good to have some sort of passion for that. So yeah, I mean, again, like it's just your definition of fun. Some people's definition of fun, maybe not my definition of fun, but that's totally cool.
Yeah. And that's what I love about sport. I mean, like sports narrows the lens because at the end of the day, every sport is based on a game and the objective is to win. Yeah. So, you know, if you don't win, you're not having fun. Yeah. Right. So, you know, like can all the other crap, like as far as music, I'm good with music at practice, all these other things that we're emerging in our, you know, well, you know, you just got to create a culture of, you know, well, listen, if that doesn't get you to the win, it's kind of irrelevant. Yeah. Now, if it does get you to the win, then kudos. Yeah. But that's kind of the big salute to Bill Belichick because he's also known for being, you know, strenuous in his practice habits still. He's the last of a dying breed, the last of a dying generation. Most people can't get away with the things that he does because he wins. Yeah. And so every player accepts the Patriot way because he wins. Yeah. So it's pretty amazing. Because I think that's what you're speaking toward, even in relation to your habits that have made you successful. Kind of last, I think just some of my final thoughts. Who would you call mentors, leaders, the people that are kind of, you know, like I said, I think you're positioning yourself properly by way of creating a great product with front office sports. But, of course, now you have emerging partners. Who are those people that are really kind of coming around you to develop those strong thoughts and continue to cast vision?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously Jason Stein, who is one of our earliest investors, right? In many ways is not just an investor, but a big brother in some regards.
Awesome.
Like he never had a little brother, I never had a big brother, and so I think that's kind of how it's all worked out. And so he's been great and super supportive, and he's one of those people who does what he says he's going to do. And I think that's why we've been able to really mesh well. And, we've had a lot of other people from an inspirational standpoint, but I think, again, it's not just been about one mentor or one person or things like that. It's just like, how do you take bits and pieces from a lot of things that go on, right? I spent so much time, again, in the restaurant industry, and there's a lot of things that I take away from what I was doing in the restaurant industry that I think we've applied to the business and the team and like things like that in a way that it's just like, again, like we have so much opportunity to do a lot of things, and if we're leaning, we should be cleaning in a way, right? And so like our whole thing is like, there's a lot more opportunity there. And so, you start to look around, and a lot of our inspiration, like even one of our big partner programs right now has been our online education business.
Sure.
And I got inspiration, and we got inspiration from that from a bunch of other places where you started to see certificate programs. And I'm like, well, if Google has a certificate program, why can't we have a certificate program? And if we have a certificate program, why can't we sell it to brands? And like, that's always been our philosophy, is like, if we can't sell something to a brand, or if we can't get people behind it, like we're not doing our job correctly. Right. Excellent. And so I think, again, there's been a lot of inspirational people. Transparently, I'm not someone who's like big into like, I need to listen to every inspirational podcast or everything like that. I'm just like, I'm much more of a like, let's just do the work and see what happens. Because it's just a little bit different. And, obviously everyone has different experiences.
You're actually working,
Yeah. And everyone has different experiences, right?
It's
like,
true.
I mean, it's good. Like I love how I built this podcast and what they've done with that. And there's like so many cool things to take away from it. But yeah, I mean, there's been like various mentors along the way that I think have helped, in different ways.
Yeah, I think that's the village mentality in general. Like, if you're wise enough and you're astute enough, you can listen, you can recognize the value that people add from all different angles. But obviously having this is an interesting, I think a question for me. What sector or business, right? You have all these, I just love the product. You have all these different sectors and intersections within sports and business. What sector of the business of sport do you think right now has the greatest growth potential?
From a growth standpoint, you're going to start to see, obviously, I think we've already seen it, but a lot of the investment in women's sports, because there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think, again, from an asset class standpoint, there's a lot of money going into women's sports right now, because there's a lot of upside from a women's sports standpoint for owners and things like that. Because you start to look at it, there's how many people can buy a $5 billion NFL team. There's not very many of those people. No. And this is nothing against the NWSL or any of these women's sports teams, but like it's a much more approachable entry point into sports ownership right 100%. Now, which I think is really going to help continue to drive the value of those leagues and teams up, because you start to see like what Alexis Ohanian and the Angel City FC people did. They put together a great group of people who are wealthy, but they're not billionaires, right? Sure. And they are launching that team. And there's a lot of interest in kind of buying in at like $30-50 million for a team, because you start to get into the upper echelons. Even like, honestly, most of the major 4 sports leagues, you have to have like real money, or you have to be a private equity firm.
There you go. There it
is. Which is fine, but like there's a lot of opportunity for people who are wealthy and to build consortiums to really lift up women's sports. And I think you're starting to see a lot of that. So I think there'll be a lot of growth opportunity there. I think you'll see a lot of growth opportunity in, I mean, honestly, emerging sports like pickleball, extremely hot right now. Just like, again, you start to think, we actually wrote about Callaway and Topgolf and what they're doing, and like Topgolf and what it did to the game of golf. And it's just funny because you think about Callaway and like how their business has evolved. And, I think it was in the article today that by 2025, like Topgolf will be, I think, responsible for half of their EBITDA, like, which is crazy, right? Like this is a manufacturer, a total manufacturer from one of the top manufacturers from a golf standpoint. And so I think you're starting to see a lot of shift of how are you, like sports isn't just going to the game and watching the game on TV and everything like that. And you're starting to see a lot more of it, right? Like Draymond Green has a podcast while he's a player. While he's commentating during the season, right? And that's great, right? Like, and there's opportunity there. And I think you're starting to, again, continue to see a lot of these just elements of the sports and business angles of it that'll be bigger. But I think, again, like growth opportunities, obviously women's sports, I think you're starting to see, again, the fact that sports is an asset class has attracted a lot of sophisticated capital and sophisticated people into the business, right? Sure. I mean, Sixth Street just yesterday bought another 15% of Barcelona's media rights, right? That's a whole different story because Barcelona's in a lot of debt and they needed to do this. But I think you're starting to see more of that. You're going to see really more, an evolution, I think, of just how games are presented and what, like, I think Major League Baseball over the weekend, they did their All-Star game and they had the pitcher mic'd up and he was like talking to the guys and they were calling his pitches and people were loving it. You're not going to see that during the regular season, but you'll see more of it. Sure. In just general and probably more of these exhibitions. And I think, again, like, it's just sports has some sort of unifying factor. So there's always going to be something interesting there. Absolutely. And there's going to always be brands who want to be associated with it. There's always going to be all these different things. And I think you're going to have the opportunity to really say, okay, like, it's just so impactful. Like you were saying, like everyone remembers that moment that you had, right? But it's like, when was the last time someone remembers the moment that their cubicle mate did something, right? And there's no offense to that, but it's just like, it's a totally different thing.
It is. Like I said, it's something that truly unites, galvanizes, and really it stokes passion, right? It's like it's like the hometown effect, where you're from. When you meet somebody, there's the connection of, I'm from Phoenix too. Yep. Sports has that same kind of uniting factor. It was actually the NIL deals that was in my brain.
NIL deals, yeah, that was a big one too.
So that was a big one last year. It was just like, it's so many new emerging markets, and I think the women's sports is definitely the big takeaway. Bro, we could get into this all. I'm going to leave one last breadcrumb. I'm available for hire for front office sports. I just want you to know that. I sought this guy out 2 years ago because, it was already there as a tremendous product. And, it's something that a high caliber person like myself, I want to be a part of. But congratulations on what you're building, what you're going to continue to see the fruit of. And thank you for catching a moment with us here, man. Give us just one last nugget as far as, you got aspiring athletes, business leaders that are going to tune in. If there is one sound piece of advice when you're talking about approaching their goals, dreams, and how they want to see their lives materialize to get to their moment, what would you say? It's
so funny because this was like one of the early interviews I ever did. At the time, it was with someone who was the general counsel of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it's just stuck with me for a very long time. And it's super simple. It says it's be a fountain, not a drain. And so when you think about that, it's really like you say, all right, I'm going to give and I'm going to continue to give. And eventually that's going to come around. And I'm not draining, I'm not going to someone with their hands out and say, hey, can you give me this? Can you give me this? No, you're just doing what needs to be done. And I've always thought that was like a really, really meaningful thing. And it was so simple. It stuck with me forever. It's all about being a fountain in everything you do and not a drain in everything you do. Right. And I think that's, if you take away one thing, that was one thing that I always took away from my conversation with David is his name, funny enough. And it was just really cool to see because I've like, it doesn't matter what you're doing as long as you're putting things out there and you're trying to add value and you're trying to be meaningful, it's going to come around in more ways than one, right? Like even just from that relationship, like him and I have built off a bunch of other things, and it's really just been simple as things as like we'll just like randomly email you, hey, saw this. I think like that's the other thing too, is from another piece of advice, and this is something that I've kind of put together over time because you've seen a lot of this specifically from a sales standpoint, but soft touch points lead to hard touch points is what I always talk about. And so like just checking in, saying hello, say, I saw this, I thought of you. And there may not be an opportunity to do business then, but eventually what's going to happen is there's going to be enough soft touch points that you're going to feel like, oh, okay, well, I want to work with this person. Or there's going to come a time where you send something and they're like, oh, I was thinking about you, would love to work with you guys on XYZ project or this, that, and the other. And I think everyone really kind of defaults to the hard, the ask. And they don't really just start to really build a relationship first and foremost. And I think that's where, again, luckily we spent a lot of time building a lot of relationships with people because that's what we did. Like we had no money, no experiences, no audience, and we had to spend so much time building relationships and doing the interviews and staying in touch with people and following up and all of these things. And I think even from a sales standpoint, this is what I try to ingrain on our team. It's just like, don't always ask, right? Just send them something and say, hey, saw this about you guys, it was really cool. Hey, this was awesome. Hey, saw you guys are doing this, even if it's with a competitor, right? Like, big win for you guys, right? It's just like little things like that. They're going to be so much more receptive versus if they're saying, buy something for us. Buy something for us. You know how it is, right?
No,
Like,
100%.
so,
Everybody's trying to win, but like I said, it can't be at the expense of the relationship when you keep that door open. But man, like you just gave us some real bread to chew on, especially, to be a fountain, not a drain. That's a big thing. And I've valued the emerging leaders of this generation because more of them get that than some of our departing leadership. I call them the legacy leaders.
Yeah.
And it's been a take mentality. And like I said, it leaves people with deficits, leaves people embittered. And it's hard to build on where people won't begin to actually see you for yourself and leave that train.
Totally.
Even if you have something valuable to offer. So, man, appreciate you for just being here with us. I'm sure this won't be the last conversation, man. Congrats, and thank you for catching the moment with us.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Hey, listen, guys, you won't get more value than that. I need y'all to continue to check in with Catch the Moment podcast. Big shout to Adam White. Check out everything that they're doing, front office sports. And, of course, subscribe, comment, share. We can catch the Moment, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Thank y'all for being loyal. We'll see you next time. Catch the Moment.